Greetings, everyone. After a short hiatus due to my travels, I have not been putting out a lot of content, but trust me, I have been fully in tune with continuing to ask the question, what does it mean to be fully human today? And something that struck me as a nugget of an insight that I'd like to share with you in a very short format video is this comparison that we continue to hear ad nauseum, that between human intelligence and artificial intelligence, they're discussed in a way that's only quantitative, not qualitatively different. They are compared because comparing human intelligence to the mechanics of a biological computer is where this comparison is drawn from. And this is sort of an ideological framework that we've existed in probably since Rene Descartes and other philosophers that have a more materialist and reductive understanding of human intelligence and a very localized understanding of where thinking actually takes place and what it's connected to. Largely, we're examining this comparison between human intelligence and artificial intelligence as if thinking is a brain activity. So essentially, thinking is equated with brain activity. That's one tenet of this ideological framework that I hear rarely being challenged. And number two, we're not looking at a qualitative difference of how artificial intelligence and that form of thinking is different than embodied human thinking, and the totality of the human being results in a completely different complexity of processes that lead to thinking. So, there's a lot of discussion on how AI will surpass and replace human beings. And again, it's based on this reductionist definition of what intelligence is. And I'm not even touching upon a spiritual perspective here that I can examine in a future video. I'm just talking from the aspect of neuroscience and neurobiology. Right now, the way we're defining intelligence is by calculating the number of calculations per second that a brain can achieve versus an artificial brain in the case of artificial intelligence. That is our sole basis of comparison in how AI is surpassing human capacity. We're not looking at other inputs. So I discovered, and you can do research on your own, I'm not going to bombard you with links and references right now, but there is a movement within neuroscience that is quite dissident in nature from this norm of brain-bound thinking, rationalism, and reasoning things out as the basis of human thinking. There's a movement called Embodied Cognition, which I've had to read a number of references and articles on the subject to understand that they're looking at a model that emphasizes that thinking is not just a process within the brain, but something that's inseparable from the body and the interactions and experiences that the human being and body is having with the world and the environment, and that inevitably influences and shapes thinking. Ta-da! Surprising? No, quite intuitive for me, but probably not the majority at large. Then there's the so-called complexity of thought. Complexity of thought is thinking that is just an abstract information processing that results in data, but it actually involves physical processes like articulation of speech and sensory and motory coordination, which influences thinking and is part and parcel of our thinking process or the package. The ecological context is not to be omitted. Some traditions argue that the brain is a tool that interacts with the environment, and it's not an isolated computer that produces thought independently. And to me, that's also easy to relate to. And then there's the whole issue of subjective experience. Like if you tell a piece of information to a number of individuals, they're going to recount the information in distinctly, uniquely different ways due to their subjective processing of that piece of data. So again, the converting and the transition from the physical brain to the subjective experience, which we call consciousness, remains a very hard problem for neuroscience. So what I want to bring up here is the science, just the science even, is not settled at all in terms of what is thinking, how do we think, what influences our thinking, is thinking limited to the brain, and how is it connected to all of our aspects of humanity? So if there is this existing complexity, and if we don't have clear answers on that, why are we comparing artificial intelligence and human intelligence as if they're one and the same? There certainly can be certain outputs that can be compared, at which point artificial intelligence will outdo human beings in terms of output and results, and product. But we cannot compare the two at all vis-a-vis the qualitative difference between the two. So I know this is a very basic notion and a very basic question to ask, but I think we're not asking the most basic questions right now. And things are being diffused and obliterated and made vacuous and vague, I think on purpose, to confuse people about their nature, to confuse people about their place in the natural world, and to help them forget that certain things emanate from the natural world, and to always drive this narrative about the correlation to the artificial process, and to compare the two as if there's no qualitative difference. So that's my message for you today. I hope you appreciate it. Share in the comments what you think about this, and there will be future videos on this subject, because we need to live this subject. We need to give examples. We need to have constructive dialogue around it, instead of just be spoon-fed these ready definitions of reductionist, materialist definition on the human being compared to a biological computer. So thank you for listening, and see you soon.